Yeah, let's start. I mean, I just thinking.
We can wait another minute or two before starting, just for people to keep trickling in. But Yen, I'm so grateful you were willing to start with a guided meditation, because I think that's really part of the whole point of why I invited people to come here, because basically, I believe. Oh, hello, Max. I believe basically we're direly in need of a way of integrating spirit and intellect, and the way we move forward, and the way we plan, and the way we are. And so I'm going to stop talking, though. Or I guess I could keep talking a little bit, but we should shift over to you leading next to bring us back home. So hello, everyone. This is recording for anyone who couldn't attend in real time. But basically, I just, what started out as a meeting to introduce two friends and new collaborators quickly blossomed into a basically this salon and research planning meeting with a broader scope. Specifically, Marcus has been doing, he's just a very deep thinker and soul and practitioner. And he's been doing this work on the cybernetics of value and awakening. And I wanted to introduce him to Todd Mertz of the Shinzen Young Foundation. And then it's like, okay, so we're trying to basically get precise on value and spirit and what these things might mean and why we should take them seriously and what we should do about it. And then basically it's like, okay, we should be talking to this person. Okay, we should be talking to this person. We should be talking to this person. And so then it basically ballooned into this salon. And so I think that sort of like gets us up to where we are now. And there's people who aren't here, who ought to be here. And I don't know the best way to have conversations like this, but basically this will be a first of many conversations slash gatherings I would like to host, where basically we hold space for each other and ourselves, and try to figure out how we should see, hear, feel, think, be together, and plan and do some good. And so with that being said, I'm going to stop talking. Jan, would you please take it away?
Sure. What if because I don't really know this group people here, I don't want to take too much time to do like a meditation. Maybe just take a few minutes, really have us like get grounded here, because I saw today is heart connection. So how about we just take 3 deep breaths together? So for the first one, any thoughts, emotions that you don't need for the next 90 minutes, or even just some fatigue in the middle of the day, breathe it out. Let's do it together. Can even make some sound. Ooh. And for the second one, I want to really check in with yourself. How would you like to feel in the next 90 minutes together? What would you like to feel more that can help you feel more connected and grounded? Maybe be more open, maybe more curious. So anything you would like to feel more, I invite you to breathe in. Breathe into your body. Breathe into your heart. Beautiful. Let's do one more. The last one. I just want you simply to feel your breath. The breath that's coming from the space, coming into your body, and go through your body, the chest, all the way down to the belly and out. As you do the breathing, I would like to feel how the breath been touching you and be with you. Let's do it together. And where does this breath come from? Where does it go? Maybe there's a space, your cold source, or your cold love that's around us, that's also inside you. Feel it. The breath in and out with the space around us and inside us. And let's do one more last thing. I would like to invite you to put your hand over your heart. Yes. Heartbeats. Feel your heart. Heartbeat. Your heart is also here with you. How does your heart want to participate into the conversation today? Feel your heart. Now I would like you to invite you to open your eyes. See the people here. And I would really suggest you don't forget you're here. Also your heart here together. That's the place we're going to listen to each other. Listen to each other, what we are talking from the mind, and also what another person really saying from their heart. Thank you.
Adam, you're on mute.
Thank you, Yen. And a brief side story, which is I would like, if I could, all of these discussions to be had in this spirit. I was, and this relates to basically, this is one of a broader set of discussions I'm going to be organizing in the coming months and years on a variety of topics, specifically though focused on matters of spirit and wellness, but also artificial intelligence and what world we think we're in, we might be in, and what we ought to do about it. And the goal is for us to have a actual conversation and a sane conversation, which I don't think is currently happening. And so before this, I have been thinking about ways I can, make it happen. And I'm still pursuing a variety of venues for people to have gatherings and like summits. And what do you need to do to be, intellectually, which is essential, like all the things. So to talk coherently, we need to be precise in our terms. We need to make sure that we potentially explicitly take on each other's perspectives and paraphrase to one another before we argue. We need to at least understand each other. So we need a common, ontology, and then we need to have reality in the loop. We agree and disagree, and how can we test things? Yes, this is all, I think, necessary, but not sufficient, because what I was leaving out is what I think Yen just brought to us. I think without that, nothing holds, no one actually shows up, definitely including me, and everything will fall apart. And so basically the goal is, how can we, as we think into very complicated and difficult issues, how can we stay sane? But how can we just, not just even stay sane, how can we even be good to ourselves and others as we proceed? And so with my hyper intellectual approach, which I still endorse, we need the things. We need logos, but we need spirit, and we need this grounding that we just had. And so if ever, for instance, I or anyone else in these discussions starts to like veer off too far, Yan, Todd, anyone, please just like call me back home to source, to actually, and I would be very, very grateful. So I guess we could have like, a chat going that we can check into with different people. So there's a lot of people who ought to be part of these discussions. Again, I don't know how to have them, but who aren't here. This was somewhat, it just sort of happened, and it didn't happen. These are basically conversations many years in the making. But then as these important conversations we're having, the people who ought to be there, I started just inviting people, people who I respected and thought would have knowledge about what we ought to do and how we ought to think about these matters. Well, which matters? Basically, what is value? What, and even, dare I say it, what is spirit? But let's, go back to more, what is value? And so we're going to get to ideas of like heart connection and to what it could mean to be grounded to source. Heart connection, that's hippie stuff. Yeah? But what if the hippies were right? And what if they have like an old vintage to what they were saying? And what if basically heart connection is a very real thing? What if it's the most real thing? What if without this we die? What if we have some 2 billion beats and that's all we got? And there's an exquisite feedback to this system and crosstalk with the brain. And that basically the conditions, the foundations of life management are the core of all value. And what if this tree, as it grows and continues, this tree of valuing, growing out of life itself, with the heart being some of the central threads, what if it has other properties, such as being poised at the edge of chaos? We'll talk later about what that means. But having connections to something like mindfulness, or a space within which there's potential that can hold things, where you can reach different regimes, where things can bifurcate and flow, or not. And so, and again, back to the heart. I take the hippies quite seriously. I just do more homework and do the science. But ultimately can't bypass it, because really, actually, I'd say, in a way, what we're going to discover with devils and details is, a lot of the mystics were just right all along, and what people, bodywork practitioners, people with experience, just being good humans, we just forgot to listen to the people who had wisdom, and how they should inform how we ought to live and what's possible and what life, mind, value is. So, I think at the end of all of our explorings, there's a sense in which we will come home in a way and know the place for the first time, as T.S. Eliot said. And there's a Max Richter song I will share later, which is very beautiful. Yeah, so heart connection. There's, among the people here, I'll open it up for like, this to be a proper discussion before I, just set the stage a little bit more. But yeah, that is a notion I think we ought to take very seriously. Like, we know, for instance, that heart rate variability is one of the best reads we have on your stress, how well you're doing. And there's notions connecting heart rate variability to these complexity notions of criticality. Michael and others can like speak to this, like ways in which anything that exists, that is, has to some way be poised at the edge of chaos. This balance of order and disorder, where things can both adapt, they can change. You have enough, basically, like looseness that there's flexibility for exploration, but enough stability that structure can build on structure. It's basically this like right grip on chaos, just the right grip, with some limits. It is like what any system that flows needs to be at all. This is a universal story across all systems, it seems, what you would call a cybernetic universality class. And the cardiac system appears to be one such system. And it appears to speak to the heart, the rest of the nervous system as one such system. And I invited Mike Johnson to this conversation because he has, I think, some potentially groundbreaking work on the cardiac system as its own intelligent valuing system in communication with the central nervous system. And I think that's something to look into. Okay, so I think that's a good number of the threads. They're kind of being brought together. But the idea is basically within, I'd say, cognitive science, to what people might call scientism, we have forgotten almost everything that is of value. I don't want to this is, there's 4E cognitive science, for instance, and there's threads within it. I don't want to lambast, but from my experience in academia, we want to, be serious and rigorous, and we're scared to talk about feeling. We're scared to acknowledge how central it is. And so we overlook it. But you're not explaining minds if you're not talking about feelings and bodies and all the things. And through some of these links, also, we are reproducing beings also. Our sexual selves too. That's going to eventually have to be part of the conversation. And there's deep threads to pull on there in terms of what that means, what that can teach us about pleasure and pain and desire, and what these things are that basically bind the mind, that bind our souls, and not necessarily sexual in particular, but what sex can teach us. And so then the idea being, wait, what? I thought he was talking about artificial intelligence. Well, there's also, related to this, a research program I'm part of involving biologically inspired artificial intelligence and how we might develop that and what that might mean. And so my friend Nick Hay is working on a simulation environment built on the principles of artificial life, where basically these ideas, we can now not just talk about them, rather we talk about them, we actually experience them, but we also test them in silico, and in some ways perhaps build them. What that means, we'll talk about later. But the idea being that in order to be grounded, we're going to have both an interdisciplinary conversation in the right spirit that keeps going, and we are going to basically get reality in the loop in a variety of ways, both through our direct experience and through the construction of an artifact, which will have certain implications for the research community that grows around it and the companies that grow out of it. This is a lot, I realize, but so I should leave it up to others very soon and have others come in. So I'll stop hogging the mic. But yeah, that's basically I think that's most of the through lines here. And so one more thing would be, Chelsea, are you here? She might not have been able to make it. No, she didn't make it. So yeah, so basically, my friend Chelsea, who introduced me to Shinzen and his people, basically has helped me to develop these ideas. And I actually, now I have to be completely transparent. I have a lot of hangups that I'm working through here. So I have some of the old vintage of this is I have this whole first career as a sex researcher, which I basically don't acknowledge to myself, as I moved on to become like a consciousness and scientist and computational models of consciousness and artificial intelligence and all that hardcore stuff. And I left that behind and devalued it. And so I'm like, oh, wait, that stuff all matters. And I think as will become clear through these conversations, it really matters. It all matters. And so basically there's a discussion here that I think will be relevant to what are minds like ours? What are the minds So what does it mean for there to be a mind that can do the things that we can do, that can be aligned in the ways we are? To kind of give the plot away, AGI is here and it's us. And the alignment problem has been solved, and that we are actually alignable. As I think, Shinzen and Dove and all of you, we are remarkably, not perfectly alignable. Sociopaths exist. We all struggle with our souls, but benevolence is actually possible. And, for reasons, we don't need to get here. There's other endeavors which are related, though. I don't think we're actually as close as people think to recapitulating the power of our intelligence by artificial means. I do not think the singularity is here as quickly as people think. We don't need to settle this now. But I think basically nature is wise and powerful. The best engineer that ever exists is natural selection, with devils and details about what that means. But basically, there's an engineer which is far more powerful and wise than we are, which basically solved the problem of AGI and alignment. And that we, as of yet, have not succeeded in destroying each other. It's unclear what will be the case. I think we'll make it through. I'm not sure. On my worst days, I think someone's going to take us all out with a designer pathogen in about a decade, but I'm really hoping that's not the case. Anyways, so the title of this meeting, which was more of a diatribe than a title, heart connection and the cybernetics of love value, source meditation, jhanas, resonant modes, feelings, emotions, pleasure, pain, consciousness, body, mind, and life. Okay, so one more quick thing before I go. Jhanas, what was that about? So there's this thing in the research description, which I think gets more of it than this ramble. But basically, and I'll let others speak to this more than me, I have models of this. I should let the experts speak about what jhanas are and what they might be able to teach us. I'm a poor meditator, and there are like adepts in this room who they should speak to what the jhanas are about. But I believe they might be a kind of golden thread, revealing basically the most essential aspects of what mind is, its connection to life, pleasure, what actually is pleasure, pain, desire, and consciousness, and selfhood, and alignment. And that a lot of things are coming together with the jhanas as a particular phenomenon and spiritual technology, and a dual use technology also, in terms of that can be approached in different ways, some of which are more or less salubrious. But with all that being said, I will stop talking now. And I think we should all we should go Quaker on this and start talking together. So Marcus, are you there though? I think I should start with Marcus, because initially this was supposed to be just a conversation between me and Marcus and Todd, and then I basically hijacked the meeting I scheduled and turned it into this like, hey, let's do this like science salon planning meeting. So Marcus, hi.
Hey, thanks for organizing this. Yeah.
So I was just wondering, like, we should all like introduce ourselves through some sort of like Slack channel. That might make a lot of sense for anyone who's interested in being invited. We'll like send invites. We can also introduce ourselves. There's like, and see what time we have for whoever's in the room and can meet for how long. But just like Marcus, maybe if you could say a few like words about yourself first, and like your interests, and I don't know how you feel about what may or may not be happening here, and what you think is important.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been kind of researching the intersection with process philosophy and the Eightfold Noble Path of Buddhism, and particularly seeing it through like a cybernetic lens. There's a lot of overlaps with Bible systems model and meta-cybernetics to the Eightfold Noble Path. And I think using like a process relational ontology, we can basically arrive at like a theory of collective agency. So that works for our own collective agency and our human like societal collective agency. And still not sure entirely like where we want to orient on this, because it's kind of just a theory of everything. But you mentioned value, and I think that's somewhat central to our human collective agency of the operating system currently is our socioeconomic system. So the book I'm about to publish is kind of addressing briefly all of what I mentioned there, and mostly orienting on meaning instead of value, if I can say it briefly.
So, thank you so much, and Shinzen, I'm so grateful you could be here. It's a pleasure and an honor as always. Marcus, I was wondering, so basically, people can start like, maybe introducing themselves in the chat, but I was wondering like if maybe you could talk a little bit more about like a couple basics to kind of get everyone on the same page. Like, so basically, you're a cyberneticist and you're thinking, and maybe like explain to people like what that's about in terms of like what we mean by like the cybernetics of value and something like awakening, because like you've gone so deep that basically like we need to like but basically there's been no time for people to get familiar with your work and its implications. I was wondering if like somehow like a little bit more of like what are like the first things for like an on-ramp for this discussion, and then we should probably after going a little bit more maybe like Todd and Shinzen can come in, and then see who else is here, and basically just keep talking. So
yeah. Basically, I'm studying each step of the Eightfold Noble Path and exploring certain relational processes, which are have a lot of grounding in 4D cognitive science and other things. And the model, basically, that the book describes is both like a phenomenological model that you can use through meditation and jhanas, in my experience at least, and just understand the nature of different cognition, whether it be through understanding, through communication and action. And I think having all of these relational processes just helps kind of orient ourselves and recognize, at least in the sense of if we're orienting on value, what our economic system's actually doing and what it should be, because it's ultimately just a proxy, and we've kind of inverted, we've attached or we've like used money as an end instead of as a means. And there's a whole lot of cognitive architecture, conscious relational processes that we ultimately want if we're trying to design like a collective agent at the human scale. So there's you mentioned like the universal cybernetics, like there's cybernetic principles that act on agency, whether it's an individual or a collective. So I think tying that to like the phenomenological meditative state and seeing the parallels to larger socioeconomic systems is really important to, like you said, ground and really be in contact with what we know exists.
That so I think like some of like the depth and the breadth of and the import and the mode of the approach of cybernetics, I think that really captures it. Colin also might be able to speak to this. Colin DeYoung, which I think's here. He's a longtime collaborator, one of the world's experts on the neuroscience of personality, and he has a framework he calls cybernetic Big Five theory, where he reinterprets basically the different components of persons as what he would call control or order parameters of cybernetic systems or goal-seeking systems. And so I guess I should probably just, in terms of like, I guess maybe like some very, if you could give us like a very brief foundation to like foundations of cybernetics and what the heck is cybernetics, and while you're at it, if you could just please very briefly just explain what is personality and what are persons, and just maybe a little bit on that, just if you could just touch on that.
How much time do you have?
We got all the time in the world. This is not research on a deadline. There's nothing at stake here, and no, actually, we have I can keep going until I drop. I know a lot of people are gonna have to drop off, but basically, I don't want to rush you, but it's just like I guess like what you like your words would be better than mine in terms of like the essence of cybernetics and its relation to like persons and personality and well-being.
Yeah, well, so cybernetics, right? That was coined by Norbert Wiener, and the original book the subtitle is communication in the animal and the machine, right? Control and communication in the animal and the machine. So, I mean, cybernetics is obviously about control processes, feedback processes, but I think that if you try to think about like what is a minimal cybernetic system, like what does it mean for something to be a cybernetic system? It's something that it's a system that is capable of pursuing a goal via feedback processes, and the goal has to be something that's actually physically instantiated in the system, right? It's a controlled variable that is a physical variable within the system that is somehow hooked up to a some kind of a detector that can basically monitor the current state of things, so that then an operator can be engaged in order to move the system closer to the goal state, right? And so you've got this fairly simple arrangement. You need an effector and a detector. You hook them up by feedback, and basically you have created something that is a simple agent. And I think that like when that kind of system emerges in the universe, that is where agency appears, and when information appears, right? Because people talk about the universe being made of information, but really the universe is just made of a bunch of differences, and the differences need to make a difference, not just generically, as Bateson said, but to a cybernetic system before there is actually any such thing as information at all. So I don't know, the way that I think about this is that if you're interested in understanding biological systems, this is something I first took from Jeffrey Gray, I would say. His last book on consciousness is really great. He basically said, if you're going to understand biology, you have to understand cybernetics. All biological systems are cybernetic systems. They all involve controlled variables with goal parameters that are pursued through feedback processes. And so essentially, right, this is one way of getting at the problem of reduction, right? Because the reason that the biological sciences don't reduce perfectly to the physical sciences is fundamentally that DNA can be physically in any order. And if you want to know why it's in the order that it's in, you need to understand the you can approach it one of two ways, right? You can either approach it just like purely historically, in which case everything is a contingency and you don't have any biological laws. But if you want to have biological laws, then what you're looking at are cybernetic principles, basically. So I don't know. I'm just sort of rambling about the basic fundamentals here, but what I've attempted to do is to start from these kinds of very basic principles about how cybernetic systems operate, and to think about how that plays out in human beings, and then to think about personality, which if you're not a personality psychologist, you might think of as something like, the MBTI or the Big Five or something like that. But if you are a personality psychologist, then personality is all persistent individual differences in behavior and experience. So anything that's persistent about a person over time in terms of the way that they act and think and feel is personality. It's a way of organizing how you think about what are the fundamental control units of people, and how do variations in the parameters of those control components play out in terms of people's actual patterns of behavior and experience. How's that for a start, Adam?
That is a fantastic start, and I'll try to both paraphrase and build on it. Also, Marcus should speak, but I'll say a few quick things, and also please correct me where the proper cyberneticist in the room should correct me where I misspeak. I think I'm a cyberneticist at heart, but I know some of you have engaged with this body of thought more deeply than I have. So yeah, it's basically you might have heard a lot of terms about cybernetics. It showed up in different ways, like when people really kind of at the birth of cognitive science and control theory, there's how do we think of intelligent systems? And in a way, it's helping to inform what is life, what is mind? And so the cybernetics was this way of abstractly addressing the nature of systems. And so it has relevance both to understanding us, but to understand other kinds of minds, the broader living world, and also though the kinds of minds we might build. These will all be cybernetic systems necessarily, because they will all have these principles being governed by feedback. And they will also, any given mind will have a personality. There will be a description of it in terms of what it does, and the way we precisely describe it in its personality and this character. The thing that makes it a system that we can talk about is like a enduring kind of even a self, if you will, or a system qua system, is its defining characteristics, the attracting states that it comes back to. It's the things that it desires both explicitly and implicitly through its inaction and way of being. And so basically, yeah, so the cybernetics of value or love and a personality is saying we're going to understand these things abstractly. And they're in order to have basically a way of talking about these things across any system in which they arise. So the personality of a language model, of a person, you could say of a language model, like Claude is different than ChatGPT, but it's still not quite like a proper cybernetic system. That's a thing. So I put in the chat basically a special issue I'm organizing where I'm trying to get Colin to help me with. I'm basically like, what do we mean by agency? What do we mean by selfhood? And basically these notions of basically, and I think to get clarity, we're gonna have to get cybernetic on it. And basically that's part of what it means to, I think, get clear on things, is to get cybernetic on it. And that we abstract away, we identify the thing in its abstract character. Now, there's a danger here of like divorcing ourselves, which I often do, from like the other ways of knowing it. But this abstract intellectual understanding of the system in terms of its defining characteristics. So here we're talking about the cybernetics of personality, and then what we're also going to be talking about, which is what basically called this meeting, is the cybernetics of value, of awakening, what we mean by that, to know what we might mean by that, what I want to learn about that, and but the cybernetics of love. What is love? What do we mean? What do we think we mean when we say love? And is there actually a phenomenon there? And how can we think about it precisely? And how might we potentially even build or grow it by other means? Okay, Marcus.
Thanks, Adam and Colin. That was a good baseline to get cybernetics kind of discussed here. I also want to introduce meta cybernetics, which some of you might be familiar with. Autopoiesis. It's kind of thrown around in various different circles. That is like essentially second order cybernetics. So all this feedback architecture has like a kind of other dimensionality to it, where autopoiesis, or second order cybernetics, is basically not just a system dynamics, but it's actually the attention, the awareness is actually causal to the system dynamics. And that to me kind of rings true to like the second path of, the second step of the Eightfold Noble Path of right intention. And then third order cybernetics is basically not just me as a agent being aware and causally changing, but two agents being aware of each other in the space between, which again seems to ring true to right speech. Maurice Yoles is a meta cyberneticist, which studies this, and I think fourth order is like barely even defined, but I also bring him up because he, for some reason, studies personality quite deeply. I haven't looked into that particular part of his research, but yeah, I feel like there's something quite fruitful in the sense of meta cybernetics and personality.
So if I can try to paraphrase, like when you're talking about like autopoiesis, so that's from like Varela and Mantrana, where it's like the ability of a system to be self-making, or like the way in which like through the thing it does, it reconstitutes itself. And this seems to be a characteristic of many complex adaptive systems and of all life, even almost a defining characteristic of life, to the extent that there's a clear class of things there that's different from non-life, but of life as something that can basically temporarily resist seem to resist the second law, while also serving everything as where the second law is basically the tendency, I'm going to butcher it, for all things to get disordered and entropy. In the meat grinder of existence, it's kind of shocking that there are things at all. Like you pour cream into coffee and it swirls, it gets kind of interesting, it goes brr. And just in general, things just become maximally probable and maximally disordered as everything rubs up against everything else. And so in this like giant salt and pepper shaker, snow globe meat grinder, how do things thing at all? And so they're doing something. They have some sort of intelligence about them, some sort of feedback. They reconstitute themselves. They pull themselves back together as they fall apart. And so autopoiesis. And so autopoiesis is basically, so how does life keep going? How does it, a bunch of complex chemistry keep its, don't want to reduce that. That's not true. Although it's also true, but it's not true. It's because it's not just chemistry, but it's physics, and there's no one scale at which you have to understand all these things on multiple scales, and it's not reducible to any of them. But still, there is a explanation at each scale, which is potentially in some way sufficient on that scale. But how do living things keep persisting? What is the intelligence of living systems that lets them to live, to adapt, and to grow, and to be? And so this principle of self-reconstituting, it's a broader principle. And so part of what cybernetics gets us is these ways of speaking. You can speak about all systems in these ways. And this gives us like common principles and insights, whether we're talking about a human nervous system, or potentially the heart, come looping back around as its own kind of nervous system by other means. Or we're talking about the people in a society and the way societies compute, if you will, and hold themselves together and adapt. And so like cybernetics is like, how do we talk about complexity? And when we come to talk about complexity, we find that there are principles that show up across scales in different systems again and again, and that help us understand. And they show up both similarly, though, and also differently, but also similarly. And so, so this will end up kind of, so I'd say like the overall approach, I guess intellectually, its foundation would be cybernetics in terms of like what informs my thinking, and I think many of us here, you could say that. In terms of like a way of understanding systems in both their particular but also their abstract character, and where the particular cybernetic descriptions we have, the goal being, can we be precise on things that seem to be where precision seems to be impossible, where specification seems to be impossible? So without doing damage to them, but actually deepen them, can we talk not just about things? So can we talk about persons in a precise and rich way? Can we talk about love? Can we talk about spirit? Can we talk about heart connection? And what do principles of understanding these systems as cybernetic systems teach us about the rules that govern these systems? So I guess, Marcus, you mentioned, basically the Noble Eightfold Path. And basically, a lot of this seems another thread here. What we're hoping to talk about, what will connect a lot of this is what is alignment? And what do we think we mean when we say alignment? How are we aligned, and aligned to what? Why do we want to be aligned? What do we want other things to be aligned to? We want them to be coherent in some ways, to flow in some ways and not other ways. And so, Buddhism as a spiritual, I shouldn't speak to this too much. So, I'm in the presence of true masters who have basically, they have been going into realms of spirit that when I was just an evil gleam in my father's eye, who are having battles that I can't imagine. So I shouldn't speak out of school here, but I'm just trying to get everyone on the same page. But I was wondering if you would, I would be honored, Shinzen, if you could just say a few words. I would be very grateful.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Sorry, I got lost on the way to the meeting. Let's say a few words about what?
Well, about
give me a vector.
Buddhism and you know, so you've written a book, The Science of Enlightenment. You're one of our great masters and spiritual guides. And so I guess the question is like, so for instance, like part of this discussion with Marcus, eventually we want to get into, like, for instance, so we started out with Yen leading us through source meditation. And basically this idea of, we're exploring of like, what is the science of source meditation? What is the science of, what might we mean by source scientifically? How might we model this? How might it relate to things like heart connection? But so we're meditating. Why are we meditating? Meditating for what? So also the other part of the discussion I was hoping to go into with like you and Marcus and Todd is you have a happiness grid, you know, and Todd also, you know, should at any point like you know, cut me off, jump in. So basically, you know, you and Shinzen have been closely collaborating on this. Yeah, I'm not sure what the best direction to go exactly is, but basically, like, you know, Shinzen, you and Todd together, I think in some ways you're our best guides to what we might mean and hope to mean by alignment for ourselves and others. Like what, like alignment to what? Alignments to the preconditions for happiness. For ourselves and others. So Todd put in the chat this happiness grid. I'll say one more thing, and I should stop talking. So interesting thing that like you know, so I personally am greatly influenced by Buddhism and grateful to the Buddhist tradition, but I also have discomfort with it. And that's an issue I'm going to want to dig into also, because some of the ways discussed in some discourses, like from some people like Sam Harris and others, where there seems to be certain implications of where it's like annihilationist views where the self is considered to be like completely illusory. And there's like devils in details, like what does it mean for a self to be real or an illusion? I worry about some potentially nihilistic implications of some interpretations of Buddhism and some ways of approaching meditation. Sometimes it leads to us being aligned to ways that connect us to source and each other and communities of value. And sometimes it doesn't seem to do that. And that's like an issue, basically, I think, as we discuss these things, that needs to like be brought in, at some point into the foreground of like, why, so it's like we have these guides to how we might be aligned to the preconditions for life and well-being and happiness for ourselves and each other. But why do things sometimes go astray when people pursue these paths? And so that's, I'll stop talking. I'll leave. So I don't know, Shinzen, Todd, like, yeah.
Can I add one thing about Shenzhen? Yeah. So Shenzhen wrote the book, The Science of Enlightenment. The whole book, the order really takes you gradually going to that place of source. The whole chapter about the zero, that's one of the, is if not the best, the best writing I've ever read. The clarity from a scientific perspective to talk about the source and the zero. So I highly recommend people to get Shenzhen's book. By the way, I work closely with Shenzhen and just translated his book, this one into Chinese. That's why it's really, I highly suggest don't miss this writing. Thank you. And please one day invite Shenzhen, just talk about that zero place, you know, he described in the book. Yeah.
So, thank you for teeing that up, all of you. For me, it goes to how do I think of the historical Buddha? And my training is as an academic Buddhist scholar. We were expected to know many languages and to delve into these things. Also, as you know, I have had a lot of time to be in the field actually teaching people how to meditate. So put that all together, how do I think, just me personally, not saying anyone else has to, how do I see the actual historical Buddha, the person that lived, that had conflicts, that had bad shit happen in his communities? I see him as the world's greatest proto-scientist of happiness, broadly and deeply considered. And therefore, we can, in a sense, think of ourselves as colleagues, where he's a proto-scientist from a long time ago, more than 2,000 years ago, way more. So we are the beneficiaries of applied category theory, functorial science. We have gizmos with logic and structure that would be sci-fi, is sci-fi to us, to me, what we can do with the categorical math that's been developed now. So take that and put it together. He's a scientist of the functorial. He revealed the functorial syntax for which the semantics is categorified semantics. So we now have a language that is recognized as part of science that is big enough to handle every question that's been brought up. Wow.
I think another thing, so in addition to, so Marcus should talk next, but the category theory angle that Shinzen just mentioned is, and Dalton should speak to this also, because part of what occasioned this ballooning conversation was excitement about some of the things that I've been exploring with Dalton, and a potential collaboration with Shinzen and others on the category theory of things like selfhood and other matters. So category theory, I should let you know. So Marcus, you just raised your hand. You should go there. But I think maybe after this, Dalton, if you could maybe briefly introduce yourself and just say a few words on category theory for people, because Dalton, I'd say, is one of probably one of the world's greatest mathematicians right now, and he's basically in trying to be precise on these topics. So one thing I mentioned was cybernetics as this like abstract systems theory and way of understanding things. And so, you know, some people are going to need to jump off. I know we can't go forever for the meeting, but I'm so grateful for the people who started going here. And I think, so let's keep going through like conversation and, you know, Slack channels, and we're figuring it out. And potentially companies, more on that soon. So yeah, so the next step, in addition to wanting to introduce Shinzen and Todd to Marcus to start talking about the intersection of their thinking of cybernetics and spiritual paths, was also basically category theory as a way of understanding these things mathematically, and category theory as a very expressive language. But basically the goal here is to, while honoring the phenomena and their irreducible character, to also try to talk about them as precisely as we can for the sake of honoring them even more. Easier said than done, but I think we can do it. And so, Marcus, very interested in what you have to say. And Dalton, if you could say a few words, I'd be very grateful. Hi, Marcus.
Hey, thanks for pinning category theory again. It's been high on my research list because I feel like it's very important to my work. So looking forward to hearing stuff about that. Yeah, it's interesting. So like we're talking about alignment, and we're talking about Buddhism, and earlier mentioned value. I think if we truly understand impermanence of things and we understand process philosophy, we can't even imagine, let alone create this thing that is aligned. Like we can't just be like, what is an aligned value system? What is an AI that's like perfectly aligned? Right. This is like a product ontology and way of thinking instead of a process ontology way of thinking. Because what happens when immediately when we create the AI that's aligned, we start praying to it and it becomes our like cult leader, basically. Right. We need to be in process with it. What is the aligned process with AI that it doesn't create a kind of cult leader type of thing?
And so when you like say like so like so this is an example of like uh to like I think address the world we're in, it's there's a kind of conversation that's hard to have, but we have to have. And I think this like and we're gonna have to go deep on a lot of different things. And so one of them, so for instance, even like natures of ontology or what is, how should we think of reality? What is reality? And so like some approaches would be like if there's like a process, I guess like people like Ravelli are like thinkers of this kind, where it's like or Heraclitus or Nagarjuna, neither process, but like Shinzo speaks, but like thinking of things not just as like things, but as becomings, as flows. And so Dalton actually could also speak of this because in addition to being our resident expert, although Shinzen is dangerous with category theory, in addition to being like the world's scariest mathematicians, Shinzen Dalton is also basically has recently introduced in the spirit of Carl, who might still be Carl Frisson, who might still be with us. Oh no, we lost Carl, but he'll see the recording. Basically, oh no, we have Carl. Wonderful, we have Carl. Carl should speak also since you're here. I slightly, I still slightly freak out. I have like, it's just like you, Carl. You've influenced me so much. I still like, I know you're real. You're a person. I've talked to you. You're a warm person, but I still was just like, Carl. Anyway, so basically, Carl and Dalton have both basically given us, I'd say, advances in cybernetics and abstract understandings of things, and advances in ways of understanding what is how should we think of reality? What are things? and how are things versus processes? You're like, wait, do we really have to get into all this stuff? It's like, unfortunately, I think we do, but not all at once. But there's a sense of like, people. We're talking about people, who we are. Is the self real or is it an illusion? Like things both stay the same and they change. How can we think about this clearly? And if we don't think about this clearly, we potentially veer into nihilism, or when we try to think about minds by other means, we don't know how to think about them. How do we think about AI? What does it mean for AI to be an agent? Is AI an agent? What kind of agent is it? And so basically, Carl and Dalton, we have basically, I'm honored that you're both here. We have basically two of the greatest minds that have ever been, I would argue, on how to think about these things. How do we think about reality and becoming and its abstract character precisely? I will stop talking. And any way that Carl and Dalton are inspired to speak, I would be Carl. So Dalton, you should speak to category theory, but Carl, you should speak to so basically the free energy principle. Like, what is a thing? I don't know. You might not be up for speaking now because this is like an impromptu meeting. But if you say anything, I would be. We'll talk later. But anything you say, I'd be grateful. But no worries if not.
Well, I'll just say thank you very much. This is my first time, so I'm a bit of a virgin here. So I'm just enjoying this. This is wonderful. So I'm not going to say anything, but I will listen attentively and possibly say something next time.
Thank you, Carl. Dalton, are you there?
I am, yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Seems so. My thing is lighting up. Okay, well, yes. So Adam asked me to say some things about category theory. I find category theory interesting primarily for the reason that it is about the mathematics of structure, but in the very specific sense of the structure of an object as it determines the properties it has with respect to other objects. So by that, I mean category theory is really the study of relationships between different kinds, different categories of objects. And you can put an object in one category or another based on the way it interacts with all of the other objects in some universe of mathematical constructions. So it makes it a very powerful way of describing things in algebra, in mathematics in general, where the sort of thing that one does is probe some object by a set of operations or transformations and tries and deduce properties of it. So with respect to modeling the physical world, a lot of physics happens in the context of interacting systems, and a lot of the notion of self and other becomes physically meaningful in the same sense as the interactions between mathematical objects determine their properties, namely the physics of an interaction sort of determines what kind of system one thing is versus another thing. So conceptually, I feel they're quite related. I couldn't say much more beyond that because I haven't devoted very much thought to it yet, but I find the initial idea promising. So that concludes my thoughts about category theory. I don't know if you want me to say anything more.
I will, and actually this is relating to the conversation we had earlier this week, which basically inspired me to Mike, I know, like, this was a very impromptu meeting. Like, I don't, so Mike Johnson, I mentioned earlier, has this really, I posted about it in the description, this incredible and I think potentially game-changing work on how we should think of the cardiac system as a kind of intelligence system, or what Carl would call a kind of agent or active inference agent. Like, what kind of cybernetic system within the broader cybernetic system, that is us, is the heart, the extended heart and cardiac system, and how does it relate to the nervous system? And so, so Mike, I don't know if you're up for it. If not now, we should dig in next time. One of the deepest minds and souls I know, and who's basically like influenced my thinking and feeling in many ways, not enough ways, but in many ways. And also, in terms of cybernetics, as mentioned, we have Daniel Polani here, who's also one of basically the, I'd say, maybe the greatest living cybernetician. So I'm honored is here and should say some things also on the nature of just anything that you're inspired to say. But I guess, Mike, if you'd be willing to say some things on basically anything that was said so far, and basically your model of vasocomputation and some of its implications. Part of the connection here with relationship to Dalton is basically, I think Dalton, so earlier he was talking about some fundamental work he's exploring on something called branching paths, which I'm going to butcher, but basically systems that have different forking properties and the way you can consider them and their relationship to things like different information geometries, different types of manifolds, including like probability, probabilistic models. And so basically this way of talking about Bayesian brains, I see them there being potential implications for understanding, like how we might understand ways things like neurodynamics and generalized neurodynamics could entail Bayesian computation. There could be a significance there. And for some of the things you're exploring, so I might have gone way too far with a pattern match here, but basically, whenever we're dealing with a branching network that has weights to it, it's going to be kind of interesting. We'll have some relationship to certain information geometries and certain probabilistic interpretations. And Carl, like later, he's the one who should comment on this. But basically, I think Dalton might have some, be able to help establish potentially some mathematical proof, potentially, like QED, for some of what you're thinking. And anyway, so
Nice.
Mike, if you would, I'm so grateful you came.
Thank you, Adam. I'll keep an eye on my battery here. It's at 2%, so if I blink out, it's that. Yeah, so I've been following Moore and Cow's work on the hemoneural hypothesis. There's this idea of the vascular system as memory, that vascular tension as sort of playing a very important computational role. And what it looks like it does so far is that basically blood flow equals dynamism. The more blood flow, the more dynamic range the network, the local neurons can explore, whereas tension sort of freezes patterns. So in some sense, I think this is sort of where the body stores Bayesian priors, which could be very, very significant. There's also this idea of a vascular latch, that vascular muscle. So we have vascular muscle everywhere we have neurons. Just kind of it sort of grows along the same developmental tracks and so on. And then vascular muscle is smooth muscle, meaning it sort of has a special setting where it can basically glue itself shut. And these latches can, as far as I can tell, they can last for a surprisingly long time. I think it's in play whether they can last for between minutes to decades. So it could be a very sort of interesting thing that you have non-neural memory sort of in a very durable state that can last for a long time. And then it sort of regulates how much of the natural dynamic range can be used. So this has some interesting implications for like not only learning, not only sort of thinking and using your imagination. If you sort of stabilize a pattern, I think that's vascular tension, but also things like trauma, things like meditation, and so on.
So would you like say it's accurate that basically like, and so some of the ways, like for instance, like what is an emotion? Like for instance, like as like you could think of it as like this sort of like, resonant mode, but resonant within what? Like what's holding the pattern? And so this being basically one of the ways that like the body is keeping the score, with score being interpreted as memory and musical score, both in the moment and across time, that basically this the attracting states of the vascular system as its own kind of intelligent system and agent are basically ways in which we clench, ways in which like things that could be otherwise, like in Shinzen's language, be more freely flowing and equanimous and non-turbulent and can get stuck. And that basically you're discussing basically the muscles around, like we actually will get like frozen states. And this would be both like, maybe there's like some logic of it of like just optimizing the blood flow locally, like maybe even like protecting you from like cuts or things, but just like, but basically this is a part of why we feel emotions in our body the way we feel them. And one of the ways in which heart is connected to mind. And so basically Dalton, like earlier this week, I was mentioning like your work to him, and he was like talking about like, for instance, like how potentially like some like heart transplant patients, there seems to be even like some like, and Mike Levin will like refer to like some like aspects of personality seem to go, and it's like, wait, that's not a thing. Maybe it's a thing. People report it. maybe there is like aspects of memory there, the way things are held in the body, and then specifically the heart body. Right, so am I butchering this, or is this like where you're going?
I think it's squarely on. I would also say that just kind of this kind of reimagines what our sort of mental reflexes are as literal muscle reflexes, which may be sort of some kinds of being like becoming less reactive, literal muscle deconditioning, and sort of respecting the same kind of parameters there. Like I also say it's this question of like what is an emotion. I think of the vascular system as almost sort of tuning the neural system, like basically constraining its degrees of freedom, like here but not here, and then you get a certain kind of classy pattern. I guess I've been thinking of like emotions as stances, basically patterns of tension where certain things are left free to move and other things are kind of stuck in terms of neural patterns.
So it's gonna take us like more to dig into the full implications of this, and but I think that should give people like a shape for part of this, and not just like the abstract, but basically I think like part of the reason it's compelling is I think people are like, yeah, that's what it's like. That's like there's like that's it. It really feels that, and maybe it feels that way because indeed it is that way, and like, and then Yen's reminding me to come back to source because we should return there. So Yen and Bill and probably Shamil should speak also, because basically they are also I'd say they're meditative adepts and amazing minds and souls. I'm so grateful they're here. And there's so many people here. Yeah, we're gonna have more conversations, and I'm gonna keep going until I'll keep going until but whoever, feel free to like raise a hand, like if you want to like get in there. And I think also like Michael, you might at some point want to get in there in terms of Michael Garfield, who basically was the I would say he was the vasocomputation of the Santa Fe Institute for a long time, and basically he was this like mycelial network connecting and lifeblood connecting all of their minds and more. And he has this wonderful podcast series called this Complexity series, which is, I believe, one of I believe it's some of the greatest intellectual content ever created. I'm hoping to actually work with him on some of these upcoming conversations around consciousness and AI to help me connect the things and have the right kinds of conversations. But so just mentioning Michael Garfield, because for instance, at any point, Michael, when you're inspired, you you know how to connect and translate your hi so Dalton, just real quickly, I guess I don't want to do you think it's possible that basically there could be a connection to some of the things you're exploring on branching paths and potentially helping us to think precisely about generalized nervous systems?
There could be, yeah, there could be. I can't say more than that because I don't have the requisite background to be more specific, but I believe there could be.
And I have an interesting suggestion from or thought that just came from Yen coming in. It could be good at times to have interim breaks, even where it's so we started with a meditation, but we could even pepper in brief meditations throughout, because marathons can get exhausting and they don't need to get so exhausting, because in Shinzen's system, if you remove the resistance, if you remove the turbulence, you can actually flow a lot further. And and this is also referenced in like some of the work I linked of yours, Mike, in terms of like, and there's a conversation that you've had recently. You're talking about like basically the nature of awakening, and if you basically can work through your suffering in certain ways, which I would be grateful to learn from you. Uh, I feel like I get a direct transmission whenever I'm with you and Shinzen and others, but like you know, life can be a lot easier, and these kinds of conversations can be a lot easier and more fruitful if we can, you know, return to source and not clench and come back to our bodies. So I don't know, you know, Yan, any of the, or rather like any of the like anyone who's inspired, who like, you know, because you know I'm surrounded by like I'm speaking these things intellectually, but you're all deep practitioners. I'm not. I have a poor practice. You know, I do kind of guerrilla mindfulness from time to time, just enough to stay basically sane. But like, you know, I'm still kind of in the, you know, before picture of the Buddha there, you know, before he figured his shit out. So
Adam, be careful of anybody who claims to be an expert meditator. That's kind of a bit of a red flag. Yeah, I support everything you're saying, because essentially what we're talking about is that can we explore problem spaces using multiple points of view, some of which those points of view are less traditional. And so when I run board meetings, like I call it ventilating the meeting, because we can get on a very linear reductionist gallop, particularly if we're talking about, you know, empirical science. So I think it's really good to periodically take a step back, and actually create some space for some different ideas to show up. And there's also, it's a point of bringing integrity to the proceedings, because if we're talking about we should get off our autopilot, or all of our autopilots in some way, one of the best ways to do that is to get off a meeting autopilot by doing something that seems non-traditional, like let's return to the source for 3 minutes. Oh yeah, that exists. So that's a long-winded way of just supporting your idea.
So that, and I also potentially wonder if like kind of like, you know, like a matinee / bathroom break too is a thing that could be done for people like, you know, who need basically, who want to keep going but are biological and maybe have had like too much coffee and tea at different points, but it doesn't. But before that, I think before anything, actually I'll be so I'm sworn to radical honesty, and I could use a quick bio break. But before that, I think it would be really wonderful, or after, if Yen, you could just like really briefly like bring us home, and then like during a brief like intermission, and you know whoever could stay on, I'd love to keep going. With whoever can stay on after like a 5-minute break, but like and whoever has to leave, you know, I understand if you have to leave, and you know there's a recording for people to tune in. I'm going to get a Slack channel going and everything.
Yeah.
Adam,
I'll-
why don't you take break? So we have about 11 minutes left. First, I want people either put in the chat or just say how would like to continue. There's so many interesting conversations. I already can feel so much stress. We want to go deeper. So you can just put on the chat, how would you like to continue? You would just say, yes, I would love to have more. Let's feel the energy a little bit. Or which topic really today you feel like, oh, I would like to discover that more next time or in the future. So Adam, why don't you take a bio break and let's give 2-3 minutes for people here to put their thoughts.
And also, I'll say goodbye now. I have someone coming for lunch in 10 minutes, which means I should put on pants at some point.
Yeah. And Shenzhen, I see you're here. I would love after a few minutes, Shenzhen, can you actually stay to lead like 10 minutes source meditation? So he's so like, yeah. So 3 minutes,
Yeah.
either bio break or put any thoughts into the chat. And you come back here to have a source meditation with Shenzhen. And for people who need to leave at hour, we can finish there, or who want to stay longer. How about this? Okay. A 2 minute
Thank you very much.
break. Yeah.
Have a good night.
So good to see
Bye-bye.
you, and talk soon. I'll be back.
Mhm. By the way, if some of you can still hear me, I'm the co-founder of a hub, the Emergent. We're really bridging science and science, technology, and spirituality. We are actively looking for good speakers and good conversations. So if you are, many of you are like, oh, if you, I want to reach out to you. So just, if you get my email, don't be surprised. Or if you're actually curious to know more, you can let me know. Thank you. Mm. Great. Yes. All right, we have 7 minutes left to the time we're supposed to finish. I always feel 7 is a lucky number. Not lucky number, it's a mysterious number in a lot of religions. So Shenzhen, are you here? 老杨？老杨你在吗？ Adam, I call Shenzhen 老杨, that's his Chinese name.
While we're waiting, a quick comment for anyone who's listening. My friend Alex is here. Hi, Alex. He soon to be in collaboration with Daniel Polani and others, is doing some really wonderful work on the ways in which life and mind might be fundamentally connected, including ways in which both in terms of their intelligence and their principles and the way in which value flows between them. Even with a place for things like what we're about to be led through experientially, mindfulness, connection to source, actually being important for the healthy functioning of a system where there is this through line of intelligence and valuing between the foundations of life management and the functioning of a system in its agentic character, the ways the body and mind connect and are coupled. And also Dalton will be coming in to do the to do the maths to make it precise. And we'll also have category theory too, but to be continued.
Yeah. Double check if Shenzhen is here. Okay, if not, I will just lead for the next 4 minutes and people can leave that time. Yeah. So again, just as you're sitting here, like simply just sit here and just notice, what do you see in your mind? Is there any images? colors, shapes, or just blank. Anything happening there, just let them be a flow, the mental image. Now bring the attention to the place between your ears. Are you talking to yourself? Or just quiet? Now feeling into your body, the physical body. Any parts of the physical body is now calling for your attention. Feeling into that. Or just feeling into your body as a whole. The simple existence. And how about the emotional body? Any emotions that you can experience in any part of your body. Let them be. So continue to sit here. Let any sense experience to happen. Let them be. Anything you feel in your body, any images you see in your mind, or any sound you hear, inside or out, they're all coming from the source and returning to the source. Just let them happen. Let them be. Let them do their own dance. They're all coming from the source and returning to the source. Thank you. So for whoever needs to leave now, thank you for the time together. Shenzhen, you came back. I meant to let you to lead. Could we do another meditation?
Oh, I think we're probably good on that.
Yeah. But I've been learning from Shenzhen, so a lot of terms I use is all stealing from Shenzhen.
So whoever is among whoever's left is remaining, I would just, I'd love to hear your thoughts and just be grateful for anything you'd be willing to share about what we discussed, what you think we ought to discuss next, like how you're thinking and feeling about all of this. Whoever, for instance, oh, Max, I'm so grateful you came, actually. Max has some very interesting work, basically trying to do active inference modeling of pleasure and pain. basically, throughout all this, I put some links in the description, but Max has some work on this also. What is pleasure? What is pain? It's remarkable, and Mike has some really interesting, I think, fundamental work in this, in something he calls the symmetry theory of valence, which was discussed in a special issue of Royal Society that basically did with Dalton and others, and was actually somewhat inspired by some of the implications of Carl's work on something called a gauge theory, and ways we can understand basically not like the mind is a type of physics system in terms of something we would call symmetry. And this, I think, also has connection to some of Yen and others' interests in terms of we're talking about what is value of, and this is very deep in Mike's thinking and what's grown out of it at the Quality Research Institute of where he developed these ideas, and both in his own first principles thinking in there on basically the fundamental nature of value and our experience of it across all autopoietic or all persisting systems, and in their relation to this notion of symmetry and how this plays out. Dalton would be able to, Michael and Dalton always will speak to this in terms of like why physicists and Carl, like the elegance of theories, like their what makes something like good and beautiful, and how physicists are actually strongly, and mathematicians are strongly driven by this sense of beauty and this relation to and there's a way of understanding it in terms of and Carl's work would be in terms of prediction. Also think of it in terms of Daniel could like hop in, and also think of it in terms of compression, but in terms of notions of symmetry and ways this you have like both physical and informational symmetries as part of the foundations of value and valence and all these things. But hi, Max. I'm so glad you came. So Max and I met recently at a Foresight Institute gathering in Puerto Rico. And we just, so we're going to begin collaborating soon. And I'm basically finding ways to get our research program going in exactly the shape of what the funding will be, both in like a research and potentially in an industry context. We need to talk. But Max, if you could please.
Yeah, I just wanted to take up your invitation to share a little bit. One thought that I had is that these are such rich, big, deep topics and intersections that at least when I approach, in activism, the origins of life, questions like this, it's easy and tempting to almost get lost in the sense making. And for me, the really alive thing, and this is actually quite inspired by Shinzen's work, is in redirecting it to human cares and more precise ways that people can be helped. And I heard that at the beginning when you were talking about alignment. To me, that's a specific problem that we can use these ideas to get clearer on. You can align these advanced large language models or whatever systems. Another thing that I think is really promising, or that I'm very inspired by, is how we can get more precise on what we mean, the causes and the things associated with pain, especially chronic pain. And so my work is a lot about how do we tell better stories to allow people to alleviate their pain and their suffering. And so I guess what I'd put out there is one way of maybe focusing and making the conversation resonant and connected to real human cores or human cares is to keep these particular problems or questions in mind, whether that be alignment or, for someone that like me, resolution of chronic pain.
Thank you. And thank you, Alex. And looking forward. I would love it if you would jump in if you have a little time before you leave. And just one quick comment would be, I think there's multiple payoffs here, I think, potentially for these conversations. And at the foreground should be, for all things, is the well-being, the flourishing, or lack thereof, the suffering of sentient beings. And including us as sentient beings. I oftentimes, get lost in the analysis and, forget my own experience. And, but, always coming back to source. Because if we leave ourselves out, you're teaching me, you're all teaching me, you can't. You always have to keep coming back. And this fundamental question, what does it feel like? How am I doing right now? How, and really, how am I, and feeling into that? How am I doing? And then adjusting based on the answer to that question. So Marcus, very interested to hear what's come up. And I don't know if we might have lost Alex. Do we still have Alex, or? Oh no, we lost Alex. But anyway, so Alex should say more later, because Alex is like such a tremendous mind and deep soul. But hi, Marcus.
Hi. Yeah, as you're mentioning, returning to source and feeling, I think ultimately, if we Ian McGilchrist talks about this really well, right? There's the kind of product-oriented hemisphere of the brain and the process-oriented, and there needs to be a dialectic between the two, right? That's why I think whether it's bringing process philosophy into cybernetics or Buddhism, being describing the path to enlightenment, not the way to align something, or like you mentioned in the beginning, the kind of mysticism around no self. I think all of these are kind of necessary to be able to move back to the progression of a dialectic back into the process way of thinking, because as Ian McGilchrist talks about, the left brain is so able to confine our whole reality, right? And then we just live within these constructs, and it's we need tools almost to move back into the process. So I feel like that's why I've been orienting around the few fields that I'm talking about.
And speaking of what you're saying about Ian McGilchrist, he's a fascinating thinker, and I love to hear both anyone's thoughts. But I imagine both Daniel and Carl. Carl's basically one of the greatest neuroscientists of all time. Hemispheric differences. How seriously should we take them? But Ian McGilchrist basically, and I'm sure Michael has I know Michael's gone deep on this. Basically, this idea that some of the ways that people have talked about left brain versus right brain, that's actually there's maybe a whole loaf of bread in there. Well, maybe not every single thing being true there. In terms of grains of truth, there are a lot of elements, with a lot of devils and details of the analytic versus the emotive, the taking things apart versus more holistic ways of understanding things. Potentially even more Western or Eastern, if you would, type understandings and ways of knowing, and that basically thinking of where we're at, this could be important for how we're addressing things, in terms of are we overly left brain oriented? I know I am. In terms of what this would mean, are you going too far into the analytic and too far into the details and analysis, and you might get tunnel vision and forget and you're so focused on the trees you lose the forest, including where you are in the given moment and what's around you. So anyways, that's what came up for that. And also Tyler, I'm so grateful you came here. So my friend Tyler's here, who basically is hard to summarize, but I met him at a Science of Consciousness conference, and he helps to lead people in management and teams, and to basically combine planning and foresight with, I'd say, lived wisdom and felt wisdom. And many of the things we're doing here is things he will guide people with. And I'm hoping for his help in the things I'm doing in terms of basically his approach to things, which is he has a wonderful podcast series. Not get the name right, but I think it's future intelligent leaders, but basically going into this way of approaching, business matters in ways that combine the feeling and thinking together synergistically, harmoniously, and how one can do this. So, and also in terms of, we'll get into later as part of these discussions, is also in terms of generalizations, speaking to models of consciousness, in particular global workspace theories of consciousness, and potential generalizations of those to not just describe people and their conscious element character, but also groups of people in the way they can be conscious in terms of their shared collective knowledge, bringing together different points of view into coherent unities for wholes are greater than the sum of their parts, of allowing you to have both integration of and differentiation, both particular, specific, and holistic and integrated. Devil's in details here, but basically, and Daniel at some point will speak to this in terms of like the importance of bottlenecks. And Carl could speak to this also, of like when you and Mike, if he eventually joins us, of like these like bow ties, and Michael from Santa Fe Institute, like of like the ways that complex adaptive systems, they seem to, there's these like choke points where they come together, and this being an important way of understanding them, of like how things relate to their informational bottlenecks. That was easy there. I'm going too far, but like I think this will all become clear through further discussion, both like here and elsewhere. So I'll stop speaking there. But anyone, did that make any sense whatsoever? Is anyone like just curious for anyone's thoughts? Yan, you're still muted.
Yeah, Adam, I want to ask you, because first, really thanks for putting this together. So many bright minds here, So I'm curious, your intention to like start building a platform people can start meet, exchange ideas to inspire each other, or you particularly want to build something or go deeper? Because I want to make sure we're all here also support you.
Thank you. I'm both. So basically, I would like there to be. I just wanted to get started, because I don't like. I didn't want perfect to be any enemy of the good, and I wanted to start having like I've been having a lot of piecemeal conversations, and I still don't know how to like have the different conversation I want to have, but I just know like both I can't be the bottleneck in terms of like the people I know who are just so deep and brilliant. They should be talking to each other more, and they already are. But I'm wondering if basically, I basically am hoping to go through this discussion series and through, I don't know what the best medium is, like a Discord or Slack channel. Daniel, I'm sure basically he's been helping to do this for the active inference community. And so maybe within and Michael also for the communities he leads, but like how we can basically have this conversation in a way, and Bill, I know also has thoughts on this, where basically we can proceed systematically and like have the kinds of because there's so many threads to pull on here, so basically right now it's sort of like we're feeling into it, and like I particularly have like ways I'm feeling into it in terms of like basically both I want to help grow a community that I think in many ways already exists, but I think can be brought together and broadened, and around conversation and sense making here on these issues of things like spirituality and consciousness, and even things like free will and agency, but and AI. But also I particularly am talking to I have a research program that's ongoing, and it's about to take the form of several companies, and that's a separate set of conversations. It'll probably mostly be offline, but we'll come into this as those things get moving in terms of like ways we can all work together in part of basically both, we're here partially for the love of it now, but funded research and research organizations in both a nonprofit and for-profit context. Specifically taking the form at the moment of it seems like potentially a research program in collaboration with the Shinzen Young Foundation, and lots to discuss there in terms of their ongoing activities and the way to support things. Here's Jonas, who's wonderful, and should definitely talk soon. But basically, so both in terms of, I have some research programs which I'm going to keep going in different forms. Hopefully, I believe in collaboration with Shinzen, but also Shinzen has both a number of activities that I think will bring coherence to this. And Nick Hay, who isn't with us right now, my friend, basically has a simulation platform for that would allow us to basically, I mentioned earlier, actually test these things out with models, and Carl could speak to this, and Daniel also, and Jonas in terms of and Max in terms of like we can actually, in addition to always feeling into it, actually testing these things, and then with a goal I have basically of basically a video game company as one way of developing this, and a platform for computational psychiatry. And basically, this also is related to an applied AI for elder care company. And basically, I have hopes of basically, as part of Carl's legacy in computational psychiatry and addressing the flourishing of, or lack thereof, of sentient beings, of basically starting a research community and company for basically intervening and for this precise knowledge, taking the form of technologies and interventions. And so this being developed both within the context of, it's hard to explain, but a video game company and an applied AI company for elder care. And that's, and basic research.
I can tell there will be very interesting projects emerging from here, yours or among other people. So Adam, first, I've been really trying to copy all these good messages in the chat. So what if you really start like any Slack or something, people can really start connecting each other. And secondly, I wonder if you want to do this either once a month or every 2 weeks, just whoever have time show up to let the conversation continue for a while. Yeah, and things will emerge.
I would love that. And so yeah, so I'll yeah, so I think
regularly, like, yeah.
Once every 2 weeks would be great. And hi, Carl.
Yeah, I promised I wasn't going to say anything, but I can't resist saying something. I repeat, this is my first time. And just in terms of this forum, which is a gift, I think it would take somebody like me a few occasions to get used to what's going on here and to feel that it's a safe space. So part of that safety is having a very clearly defined beginning and end, and a very regular and predictable pattern of opportunities for people to join. So I'd fully endorse that notion of there being an opportunity to party like this in a safe way with friends, with no agenda, just to, because you enjoy being there. And I also, I was very compelled by the way you bookmarked the beginning and the end. So for me now it's finished. So I'm allowed to talk now because it's finished. But I thought that was a very useful thing to start and stop very clearly in exactly the way you did. I thought that was really nice. So I just wanted to feedback in. I think at this stage, just creating a space and a forum for interaction is the only agenda and the most glorious agenda. And this has been a lovely start for me, and presumably for some of you, continuation of something that's been going for a few months or weeks.
Yeah, lovely. So, Adam, would you like to? I personally do need to leave. Any final words from you? And do let people know we will continue. Yeah, maybe more like regular things so we can mark our calendar. Yeah.
So I guess some maybe meeting again like this in a fortnight for, so we went on, so this was, yeah, so clear stop time. So definitely no more than 2 hours. And I'm wondering, you know,
hour and a half is good for people's concentration, and people who want to stay can stay for till 2 hours. But we can get people
something like we have like an agenda that we explore, like where it's like, you know, like the people who show up, there's 90 minutes, and then there's like, for people who want to keep jamming, there's like an actual 30 minutes where we keep like going and jamming after that.
Yeah.
But then like with a, you know, human bodies thing, like not going more than 2 hours probably.
Yeah, and also hour and a half by science is good for time for concentration afterwards, you know. Yeah, great. Do you like to do it every other week, every 2 weeks, just for hour and a half, or once a month? Oh, Jay is here. Jay.
Hi.
Wow.
Been a while, Jay.
Join us next time at the beginning. It's another super bright scientist.
Hello. I was listening for the first hour, just as a shadow in the background.
Well, I would love for you to be parts of these conversations and like to just, you know, describe the work you're doing with like, you know, interventional ultrasound and your research and the way it addresses all these things, because basically so many of these threads are there just in like what you've been doing in all these different contexts. So so yeah, so definitely in 2 weeks, although there's a possibility, you know, for whoever's there, basically a week from now, I don't know, like there might be another subset, I'm not sure, but basically for sure, like everyone here 2 weeks from now can keep going. But you know, I guess I'll ping people to see where they're at. Yeah.
And another thing I want to get also sense from people, once we can just free conversations, or another things, each time we have someone, give the person a solid half hour to introduce her project, so can go a little bit deeper, because I want, oh, there. So I wonder what works with people. Like each time we still have someone have certain time to present their research or project. And also have free space for everyone just talk, you know.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful idea in terms of like, and like variable lengths. So for instance, like sometimes a person might want to go for like, you know, I got 5 minutes, but sometimes it's like, here's like a full half hour, the person does a deep dive. And we could have even like schedules, like, okay, so here's like a half hour deep dive with this person, and maybe like a couple, like, here's like a 10-minute, you know, two 10-minute ones, 2 5-minute ones, you know, like ways of doing it like that way in terms of like giving multiple people, like, depending on what they have, like something like that. You know, I don't know the best way of doing it, but something like that, like giving people a chance to like go deeper.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
Carl's still here. Do you have
No,
any?
I'm still, yeah. Even though it's officially stopped, I'm still here. I promised I'd still be here. No, it just 2 points. I can see that exactly that suggestion is going to be realized at some point, but there's no pressure to do that. However, an advantage of having a themed session, you know, every fortnight or every month, is that people can opt in and out, and I think it's important that you give permission to do that. That you don't expect everybody to be available every fortnight or every month. But it is an open group that, you know, when you do join, you feel, you know, that it's okay to join. You don't have to feel guilty that you had to miss one because of other commitments. One way to structure that would be very much like Adam did with this one, is to sort of give it a title. I can't remember what he referred to it as, but it was a whole list of really interesting things. Perhaps if it was themed. And then, you know, if it is the case that somebody has a particular commitment or passion for the theme, then they'd be asked to introduce and to sort of showcase from their perspective what's going on, so that people can say, oh yes, that's something that I really need to be there for, and I'm going to rearrange my diary, or not, depending upon one's other commitments.
So yeah, so next time, so after talking to some people, yeah, like a more focused theme of where we dive in next, but also, yeah, and a means of both, like, yeah, there's, you know, not making it like, you know, everyone would have to like show up every time, also through like, basically like this recordings being made available for people in the group, if, you know, so they can catch up asynchronously. It's like you have with your TNB meetings, like basically it's like, you know, there's an ongoing conversation there that's like basically one of the, you know, hardest to follow, deepest conversations there is, but it's like people that need to have the means of like contributing both offline and offline. So basically structuring kind of like that, it seems, would be like.
And also, like Carl mentioned about the safety, I noticed myself beginning with a little bit like, I wouldn't say not grounded, like I didn't know when's good time to ask questions. Should I listen? So if we also let people know kind of, now it's time to present and we can ask questions or something we can figure out more. But again, we're doing is feeding into this, you know, like we feel more comfortable also knowing people are very respectful. They still want to know what they're supposed to do now. A little bit like let them know they can interrupt you or not.
Oh, they could definitely interrupt me. It could be good to have like a moderator too, like for instance, like Todd, like if, you know, if you like, for instance, you know, just anyone or Michael, like, so I'm not experienced as like a moderator. So it's like, I'm basically, it's like, I know all of you. So it's like, I kind of know the intersections, but like to like, I do not know what I'm doing. So,
you know, and you're so passionate. So Adam, I'm happy to even have an offline, like this more discussion with you. I've been supporting a lot of like facilitating conversations like this. I can share some of my experience. Yeah.
So part of, from my perspective, is that there's a community being created here. And so there are certain good community guidelines. And that definitely involves sort of like having a moderator. We might want to have that be a traveling position where different people who are willing to moderate different days that they're able to be there, so that it isn't sort of like located with one person, or that, you know, it's not just the case that Adam always has to be, you know, front and center, and that sort of thing. So I would definitely be interested in being part of that conversation between you, Yen, and you, Adam, around like, what do we want to set as kind of assumptions for the group? Like Carl mentioned, people are welcome but not expected. There's a difference between the way communities function and project teams or organizations function. And I think that this feels like more of the beginning of a community to me than like, it's not the same as like a centralized organization with disparate projects. It's much more like a community with a lot of ins and outs and different flows than projects or organizations.
There's a sense of, actually, I should talk to Daniel about this, because like with the Active Inference Institute, and like there's a sense of, so, you know, I would love like a fortnightly meeting, for instance, where it's like people have an opportunity to, like, they might really want to be there for that in general. But I also I want ideally if there could be more often meetings, without like, me or anyone else as a bottleneck there, in terms of like people meeting in different configurations to keep the conversation going. So, you know, I don't know. So, Daniel, with the Active Inference Institute, like, you basically, so both like basically Carl with his theoretical neurobiology meetings, they have a more frequent cadence also. And Daniel, you also have like, you host conversations of like, that can happen in different configurations of people. Nice.
I'm going to have, my device is going to run out of energy in a second. So if I disappear, that's why.
It's so good to see you, Shinzen. Thank you for coming.
Well, I'm still here, but gone soon.
One of the things that I've seen in the development of our community, and I would just, and when I say our, I've worked with Shinzen for 14 years, so I'm essentially Shinzen's chief of staff over a long period of time. In our community, there is a group of decentralized organizations. And what we've needed to say is that each organization is in charge of its own business, and they're open to invite anyone into their projects or discussions, but that they control that invitation and those discussions. And that anyone that's invited in from the community, that's an informal invite until it becomes formal. And so, of course, within a community, one of the most valuable things is the water cooler conversations, right? When one person reaches out to another and it's not structured, it's not too formal. And so I think that absolutely what you just mentioned, Adam, needs to be one of the explicit assumptions that we say, we all get to assume that, you know, you can accept an invite because as an open thing, but there's no expectation of an invite to a particular project or a particular topic or a particular thing. And then the group all is able to get together as a group and we can see where we stand as a group.
I mean, so for me, so Michael writes.
Adam, you see the message from Michael. Also, if there is a shared destiny, even more obvious, tangible. Yeah, maybe give few sessions. That's what also emerged more.
So that's so I'll be following up, with both like both in the form of subsequent conversations, but also through emails and the establishment of a Slack channel with more details on like the developments that are ongoing and like what I see as like the potential like tangible opportunities here, some of which are time sensitive. In addition to growing a community, there's some basically funding opportunities I'm pursuing and means of supporting people, and I'm trying to get clarity on like what's possible and who could be involved in what. And so I'm trying to resolve that via a very large conversation is clearly not the thing to do. But it seems like though this is a good means of like giving it, a shape to some of the threads. But also, I'll be following up, in the Slack channel with invitations. And the exact way though, for instance, the community around this grows and how it's managed, I think like what's been said seems like, it seems spot on to me. And so I would like to take your lead in that and do it that way. And so, yeah, I'll be in touch. So basically, I'll probably in about maybe I could stay on, for anyone who wants to keep talking till another like 10 minutes or so. But then I probably should go take a nap. But I guess like while we're all still together, I don't know. What do people think? Good. Okay. Thank you so much for coming to this. I know it was very non-traditional. It's some very non-traditional things are happening, and so it's like, how can I have the conversations with all the people I want to have conversations with right now and get as many people a chance to inform what's happening, because there's so many people I know who basically I want to be involved and want to collaborate with them and want their perspectives on what I'm planning, what they think should happen, and what they think should happen, and so we could talk it out and like live into the opportunities here. So thank you, everyone. And thank you, Max.
Adam, you have another volunteer here, because building a community is not easy. So as a lot of people can give advice, you need a few people, maybe 3 or 4 as a core team actually doing things, writing things, send out emails, So maybe I also suggest to have few people willing to really work with you, do something, like take some actions. Yeah.
I mean, I would love to work with you and Pax and Michael and all, so so
I'll write down the names.
yes, so right now, it's like, whoever I'm currently, it's a labor of love. I'm, doing it out of the love of it and the passion for it. But, I'm also looking for ways to support people in doing this. And I think I'll be able to do that soon. But in the meanwhile, like any help in terms of moving forward and being able to discuss this, I'll be as I go with next steps, I'll be in touch and just be for does this seem like the right thing, and getting feedback and coordinating on this. So thank you.
Deeply
Thank you,
appreciate
Adam.
having this conversation. Yeah, thanks.
Thanks,
Thank you very
Adam.
much.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Nice to meet you guys.
Thank you, Adam.
Thank you.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks for hosting this. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Cheers,
See you
Adam.
later.
Adam,
Yes.
you're leaving now, right? You
Yeah.
have to- yeah. But thank you for doing this.
Thank you for coming. And I think
Stop recording. Just
yeah,
for
I'll stop the
a
recording.
few minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just a few minutes. Yeah.
So manage recording. Stop recording.